Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Monday morning, December the 20th, 6 o'clock here in Calgary, Alberta. I'm just waking up and having a coffee and just putting the chat room open right now. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And I just want to continue looking at this article that we were looking at Friday morning, and we'll just go from there. We went about halfway through there on Friday, so I want to take a look at the rest of it, and then we'll move on to another article there. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. And, I always say this on every show. I'm not a counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates or degrees or anything like that in that area. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows. And all my topics are, surrounding child abuse and domestic violence and abuse of all types. And so you have to listen at your own discretion. And, you have to know what's good for you to listen to. And if the topics of abuse will bother you, then you need to turn the show off, or you need to listen to something else on Blog Talk Radio or something, because I cover everything to do with abuse, and I really, just say it like it is, So my shows could trigger people, and my shows are very much, talking about sensitive material, really sensitive material, that a lot of people might find very hard to listen to and uncomfortable. So, you have to know what's good for you to listen to, and it is ultimately your discretion. So if the show bothers you, please just turn the show off if it bothers you. If you're under 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows. And the reason why is because I believe in protecting children at all times. And anytime there's a chat room present, I just believe that children should be protected. And so anyone under the age of 18, you should know how to keep yourself safe online, and what to do and what not to do in a chat room situation. And you can get that information just by typing internet safety, online safety into your browser, and you can find that information and learn how to keep yourself safe. And mainly the reason I ask that, young people under the age of 18 have permission to listen to my shows, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows. And, I'm talking about abuse, and I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows, right? So anybody who's under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my show. Have somebody listen to it with you that, you trust, and that cares about what you're doing online, and see if they can help you make a decision whether you should be listening, right? So we'll get right into this article. I just popped the link into the chat room, and I have my good friend Gypsy Witch here this morning. Hello, hello. And we're looking at Friday morning. We were looking at this article called. Let me just bring. I want to get you the full title. I'll give you the link too. The deleterious effects of child abuse. That's what we were talking. That's what we're looking at. It's by Alan N. Schwartz, and he's got a PhD. He's an LCSW, so I don't know what that is, but anyway, he's written some stuff here, and he's got quite a few articles on this particular website, and this is www.mentalhelp.net, and this is where I found this information. There's a lot of information on here about child abuse and everything relating to it. Child abuse, effects of child abuse, domestic violence, the different sort of, because this is mental help, right? Mental help, it deals with mental health issues, this website. So there's information on here about dissociative disorders and, all kinds of stuff. So, go check this website out. There's some good info here, and so that's I just stumbled across this website and found that there's a lot of good information on here, and about all kinds of different things. So, go and check it out. There's stuff on here about post-traumatic stress disorder and mental disorders and life issues, wellness, and everything. So there's all kinds of good info here. But I want to pick up where we left off. And this, Alan N. Schwartz was saying, he was just talking about the deleterious effects of child abuse, and that, by what he meant by deleterious, which I didn't even know what that word meant, was meaning that the impact is often delayed and slow to develop, but acute when they do occur. The impact of abuse, right, and child abuse, right? And he says that the consequences that many adults who were abused during childhood experience its worst effects long after they have entered adulthood. And so we were talking about that on Friday. And so I don't want to read the whole thing over, but, you can go back and take a look at this. Where we left off was that he was talking about the dissociative disorders, right, in which the survivor of child abuse goes into a fugue state in which they are unaware of what they are doing or where they have been. It is a defense against stress, which, when it happens, brings the person back to the original childhood trauma. So that's where we kind of left off. And then number 8 was most of the other symptoms associated with depression and anxiety. So that's some of the effects of child abuse, suffered as an adult survivor. Not everyone would, obviously not everyone's dissociative, not everyone has PTSD, I guess, and you'd have to be diagnosed, right? And I don't really like to self-diagnose myself. I do take a look at this stuff and think, well, I don't know, as suffering as a child, being abused as a child, I don't know, might have some PTSD or, different things like this, or depression or whatever, and maybe even some clinical depression, because my mom was diagnosed manic depressive, which is really another word for it. It's bipolar, right? And I just discovered that last night. And my dad was diagnosed borderline schizophrenic, and one of my brothers was actually diagnosed manic depressive, because he was always trying to kill himself, right? So, but my mom was also talking about suicide all the time, and that was just the norm in my house, and it was a real problem. And so, I don't know. I've never been diagnosed, right? So I'm not sure. I don't like to self-diagnose myself. I don't know exactly if I have these things or not. All I know is I have this. I sort of see some of the symptoms, and when I'm reading this stuff, I think, well, I've sort of experienced some of this or some of that, but I still don't self-diagnose myself and say, well, I've got this or I've got that, because I don't know. I have never been diagnosed, right? But I know that I can relate to a lot of it, and some of it I have seen in my own life and in my family's life. Some of it I haven't. So it's just, it's not good to really self-diagnose ourselves. We just need to, if we really want to know the truth, we need to go get help, right? And go get a professional to make those clear decisions on, just by looking into it. You know what I mean? Instead of just guessing and wondering, right? My dad, because he's borderline schizophrenic, which really he's more schizophrenic than borderline. He thinks he's got everything. So the minute he hears something, if he hears somebody say, "Oh, well, I've got cancer," well, he's got cancer. And if somebody says, "Well, I had this issue going on in my body or whatever," then he'll be like, "Oh, I have that too." He's just got everything. He's like a bit of a hypochondriac. I don't know. Not that. I don't know what. There's a word for it when people take on all these different things that they hear about. It's like if he hears something or even reads something, he's got it for sure. Some sort of disease or some sort of issue, right? And that's a hard way to live. I don't want to self-diagnose myself. But some of this stuff I do relate to. So he goes on to talk about here, this Alan N. Schwartz says, symptoms experienced mostly by those who were abused by children. And he lists a whole bunch of stuff off. And not everybody would experience this stuff, that's for sure. That's what they always say, is it depends on the severity of the abuse. It depends on the individual, Depends on how much interaction with normal, positive role models a child might have had in their life, even if the child was being abused. Depends on a lot of things, right? So if there was no positive influence and it was just all complete horror and twisted, then of course the effects are going to be a whole lot different for children who suffer in that, or if they suffer, just for a very short time in a home where there was some loving support by someone in the home. And, that's the thing, we're all different, or all of our situations were different. So some of these things we might feel like, wow, I kind of relate to that, and some of it not. Like I don't relate to everything. I just relate to some of it, and usually, so that's what I do, is I just read from these pages and then sort of bring out what I sort of went through, or what I know that I sort of, I sort of relate to, you know what I mean? So he says here, number one, lack of trust in other people. Sometimes this distrust can resemble paranoia, right? That's what someone who was abused as a child, might have in their, as adult survivors might have issues with, right? Lack of trust in other people. Sometimes this distrust can resemble paranoia. And that's for sure. This I know for sure, because I had a real hard time trusting anybody for a long time. And I just didn't, that's not that I didn't think they were going to beat me up or something just because my mom beat me up as a child. It wasn't that. It was this issue that, could I really allow somebody to get close to me because they might hurt me? Like they might break my heart, sort of thing, right? And I just couldn't take it anymore. This type of thing, just knowing that, people do hurt people, and that, when you grow up seeing this in your own life, and just, seeing your parents hurting each other, and then, if a child being abused in the home as well, you start to see that, hey, people don't always treat people right, and not everybody is trustworthy, and that people do hurt people, you know what I mean? And so you do grow up sort of distrusting everybody, you know what I mean? And, it's almost like you got to be, I don't know, can we really trust anybody, right? At any time people can hurt people, and that's just the whole issue. And generally they do, And so if we wanted to base our, having friendships and close relationships with people based on trust, we wouldn't get very far. We wouldn't have very many friends because just about anybody can hurt anybody, even the people that you do trust. It's just the fact that we do have to be careful what we're doing, and be kind of careful about relationships we're entering into, and if, not allow ourselves to be abused anymore. We got to set boundaries, and we got to set, we got to know what we're going to tolerate in a relationship and what we're not going to tolerate. That's the whole issue. And can we really trust anybody? I mean, to not hurt us? Not really, because even our most closest friends and family and people who are the closest to you, that's who's really going to hurt you. The other people, the casual acquaintances, probably won't. It'll be the people that are supposed to love you and that you would think would care about you, and you would think that they would be a little more careful what they say and do around you. Those are the ones that are going to hurt you. And that's a fact, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband, wife, or partner, like, friends, coworkers that you develop this major kind of friendship with, and then all of a sudden, I've seen this in every area of my life, But I mean, as a child growing up, I realized, hey, you can't trust everybody, especially your parents, right? And for me, it was a huge issue, So I learned to not trust people at a very early age, and so it's real easy for me just to not trust people. And so when I got into a relationship, I didn't really trust the people I was getting into a relationship with, which was only a couple of guys, and I didn't trust them, that's for sure. And we had to learn to work together, so that we wouldn't hurt each other, and that's the whole issue. It took over a year, probably about almost 2 years, really, of working through things with my partner that I'm with now. I've been with for 15 years, and we learned that, and we told each other that, hey, we were going to do the best we could to not hurt each other, and that we were going to be trustworthy. I could trust him, he could trust me. We really had to work out some stuff because at first it wasn't looking so good, and so everybody has to know that people can't hurt them, and but if we didn't give it a try, we'd never have any friends. We'd never ever be able to have any kind of relationships at all, So I think that's really sad, and I think, that's a bad way to live, right? Number 2, chronic feelings and thoughts of guilt about anything and everything that happens to them and to others. Chronic feelings and thoughts of guilt about anything and everything that happens to them and to others. That's kind of interesting. I know I do take on some roles of guilt, if I feel, that I'm doing something that my family's not going to approve of, then it's kind of like, oh, well, I know what their view is going to be, right? And I'm probably pretty accurate. I'm talking about my immediate family, which would be my siblings and my dad. Like I know them pretty good, and over the years, right? I mean, I know how they react to things. And I mean, with those guys, I could probably pin it down pretty close to how they feel and think about me. But other people, how do you really know? You know what I mean? As far as like friends or coworkers or people in your life, just any number of things can happen where, you get this chronic feeling and thought of guilt about anything and everything that happens, and that's a bad way to live, just feeling like, oh, it's harsh on children, when you grow up being abused and your parents actually put that guilt on you, that shame, it's like your fault, it's like, well, this happened because you did this, and I've had to treat you like this because you were bad, or I heard lots of stuff like that when I was growing up. My mom would be like, well, I wouldn't have to treat you like this if you were a good child. You're just a bad kid, and that's why I have to do what I do. And it's then of course I made me feel bad, right? Because I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I am a bad kid, which I did turn really. I mean, I did kind of do a lot of bad things. I had a lot of bad behaviors, but that's because I was just watching my family, right? And but I guess I was supposed to not do that. Everybody else could do that, but me, right? So that's the whole issue. That it's hard on kids, right? They start to think, well, maybe it is my fault. Then you grow up as an adult. If you haven't worked through this stuff, you might think that even as an adult, everything around you sort of is your fault, or you take on that guilt or whatever. So I try not to do that. Actually, I don't have too many problems with that. Because I know the abuse was not my fault, and I know that what my parents did to each other and what they did to the family is not my fault. You know what I mean? So I don't really take on that role. The adult role that I take on now is that my siblings, because they're in denial basically and just want to think that everything was just okay, that the way we grew up was fine with them. I have this issue where I know they're looking at me as if I'm just this this heathen because I've gone and gone public with our story, and I know that they don't like it. I know they don't appreciate it. One of my brothers hates it. One of my brothers, well, he's the only brother that I have left, right? There's only left. He hates it. He hates what I'm doing, and he's very unhappy that I've gone public. So it kind of does make me feel like, it's like, well, I am what I am, and I told the truth, so whatever, you know what I mean? But that's the whole thing. I feel justified in doing it, and so I don't care, and it's not like they were all that supportive before that. But I don't know. As far as thoughts of guilt and stuff goes, I don't know if I have that issue or not. It might be sort of that related to that, especially at work. Like if I do something wrong at work, then all of a sudden I kind of go back. I sort of revert back to my childhood of being in trouble with my mom, especially, right? Because my mom put the fear of God into me. Well, she put the fear of death into me. Really, is what she did. And so, if I get in trouble at work, or if I get in trouble with people that I'm working with, or have done something that's at work that messed something up and created an issue, then I kind of do go back to that whole thing of being a child, and the fear kind of sets in, and I start thinking, well, maybe I am just bad, or I am just stupid, or I'm worthless. Just the same things my mom would tell me. That sort of thing will kind of run through my head a little bit, because I'll be like, yeah, maybe I'm just a loser, you know what I mean? And then I have to remember that, no, I'm not a loser. People make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And that these other people out here who were not abused, who had perfect, lovely, who has a perfect childhood. There is no such thing. But I'm saying who had this lovely childhood, where they were loved and they were taken care of, and they got their needs met, and they were brought up properly. They make mistakes at work too. And you don't see them carrying on and saying, oh, I'm just worthless and I'm just useless. No, they just say, oops, I guess I'll really have to try to not do that again. So I started to watch other people's behaviors, and I started to listen to what people were saying around me, and realized that, I don't have to live like that anymore. I don't have to live underneath the heavy burden of that load of that abusive behavior from my mother. That was a long time ago. And just because, but that's the sort of stuff that can stay with you if you don't work through it. And that's why it's really important, to take a look at our own behaviors as adult survivors, because I know I'm just trying to correct a whole lot of mess, that was not my fault, and I'm trying to fix it so that I can move on and have a nice life. I don't need to, I'm sitting there thinking, do I have to suffer my whole entire life because of what my parents did to me as a child? I can't believe this, you know what I mean? And not only that, but their toxicity and their abusiveness continued on till pretty much till I left the country, which was like when I was like 29 years old, just turning 30 years old. So I mean, I was still around my mom's toxic bullcrap, until I was older, right? That's the whole issue. She never stopped being abusive. I mean, she couldn't beat me up anymore. She couldn't chase me down and beat me up, but she could beat me up with her words, right? And she continued to do that until she died, right? And so, that's the whole issue. I mean, do I have to continue to suffer because, 15 years later, because of 30 years really of abuse, you know what I mean? So I'm like, no, there's got to be a way to get around this, you know what I mean? There has to be a way to, to work through this stuff, right? I deserve to have a good life too, and I don't have to let what those people did, to me, destroy my life. And that's where, as soon as I started to recognize this stuff, it really made a big difference, because I'm like, hey, I don't have to allow myself to suffer and die this horrible, messed up person, you know what I mean? Like whether I take my own life or whether I just choose to live through and not get some help, like Gypsy Witch says here, in the chat room, she says suffering is inevitable, misery is optional. Yeah, and I like that. You're so right. You know what I mean? That's what I thought. I thought, do I have to continue living like this? This is stuff that my parents put on me. This is stuff that really had nothing to do with me. Really, absolutely not. I did nothing as a child that could, to deserve the kind of treatment that I got. Actually, none of my siblings did. My mom and dad chose to do what they did. They chose to use us for punching bags. They chose to use us for whatever they wanted, at the time. So that wasn't my fault. That wasn't my siblings' fault. And I'm sitting here thinking, do I have to pay the price for this my whole life? I mean, my God, I was ready to self-injure and ready to take my own life again at the age of 41. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. I mean, why am I still doing this? I started to realize the pattern. I started to see the pattern, and I started to think, these two monsters did this to me and a sibling. And, why am I still suffering from it? Like, this is ridiculous. I deserved so much better. I started to realize, hey, wait a minute. All I'm going to do is allow them to win this fight if I give up and just give in and say, oh, well, I'm not worth anything anyway. My life just sucks and blah, blah, blah. And I just continue on down that road of self-injury and self-sabotage and everything else. And, not wanting to try to heal and not even allowing myself to heal. I started to think, what am I doing? Do I really need to continue living like this? And that's where the change happened. That's when I actually decided, hey, no, I deserve to have a good life. We all do. Nobody deserves to be abused. And, that just sort of, was the catalyst, right? Was just to realize, hey, I did not deserve that. So we don't have to allow this stuff to completely destroy us, but we do have to work through it, and it's not easy. And it does take time, you know what I mean? So, but we can do it for sure. Number 3, Alan Schwartz says, a tendency to choose partners who continue the abusive behaviors they experienced during their childhood. Some of these people do become abusive, but most often they continue to re-experience abuse in their lives. And so, that's a picture of me, really. Like he says, a tendency to choose partners who continue the abusive behaviors they experienced during their childhood. Some of these people do become abusive, but most often they continue to re-experience abuse in their lives. Well, that's more me than me picking a partner who was abusive, because I especially the guy that I'm with right now, we've been together for 15 years, and he didn't grow up abused. He had a pretty good childhood. There was some problems, and his dad died really when he was quite young, and but his dad loved him, and his mom loved him. His parents they loved their children, right? And they loved each other. So there was none of this, domestic violence and abuse. There was none of this child abuse, you know what I mean? They had lost some siblings in a fire and stuff. There was some depression. I think his mom suffered from a little bit of depression because she lost her first 3 children in a house fire, and my sweetheart was the only one that made it out alive. And so they doted on him because he was the only child that made it. And so they were like, oh my God, we have 1 child out of 4. And so they totally kind of overprotected him, I think, and they doted on him. They totally, because they had lost these other children, everything became about him, and he was, he was so loved and he was so taken care of, and that's awesome, you know what I mean? But he's adjusted pretty well. He doesn't sit there and just think me, me, me. He's actually one of the most giving people I've met in my lifetime, and he's extremely good to me, you know what I mean? I was the one that was the abuser in the situation when we first met, because I was carrying on these behaviors. So like Alan Schwartz says, well, a tendency to choose partners who continue the abusive behaviors. Some of these people do become abusive, but most often they continue to re-experience the abuse. That was me. So he was having to put up with my abusive behaviors that I was taught how to do as a child from my mom, and he was just like, what? Like, whoa, you need to settle down. And so, yeah, it was hard. It was very hard. I had to work through a lot of stuff, and I didn't even realize that I was doing it. I didn't think there was anything wrong with my behavior. You know what I mean? And because that's just how I was treated when I was young, and that's what I was doing to him. And then just re-experiencing the abuse. Now he knows that he's terminally ill, so we do not live together now, and he's kind of end stage. You know what I mean? Like he's getting closer and closer to end stage every year. But it's a miracle he's still here, and he would say stuff like when we were together, he'd be like, he'd wonder, like, he knew about the abuse because I told him, and this was long before I wrote the book. I only recently wrote my book, but he knew about the abuse because I'd wake up crying in the middle of the night and stuff, and just nightmares and stuff, and I'd have these days where I'd just be sort of depressed and whatnot. So he knew it was an issue for me, and he'd just be like, well, you need to learn to move past it, because he didn't know anything about what it would be like to be abused, and he didn't know how you would even talk to a survivor of abuse, you know what I mean? And so he would say stuff like, well, you should be able to just move on. It shouldn't be affecting you now, right? And I'd be like, honey, you have no clue. You have no idea what this does to people. You just wouldn't even imagine what goes on, in a survivor's mind, and what goes on in a survivor's life, And but he was always supportive, and he's good to me, you know what I mean? And he didn't get mad or get upset if I couldn't seem to get past things. He just let me go through it, and it was probably hard for him to watch, you know what I mean? Because I'd spend sometimes just days in a funk, and he'd be just like, well, honey, you you can do it, and I'm here for you. He's a good man. He's a very good man. I was very blessed to have him in my life, and he's really probably part of the reason I've actually done so well is because he's allowed me to be myself instead of trying to change me to be somebody that he wanted me to be. He's actually allowed me just to be myself, which is a survivor of child abuse and a survivor of secondhand domestic violence. So, he knows what I've been through, and he's allowed me to just work through my thing without trying to say, oh, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. He's very supportive, but he wasn't abused, so he doesn't he doesn't know how much it hurts and how hard it is. You know what I mean? So, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I have some guests here, and I have Sally69. Hi, Sally69, and thanks very much. I appreciate it. I hope everybody gets something out of the show. You know what I mean? This stuff is really important to me, and I know there are so many survivors. You know what I mean? And I know so many myself, and I've known so many over my lifetime. People would say, well, there isn't that many. How many survivors could there be? Well, I can't even count them up on my 10 fingers. And my 10 toes. I know so many people who were abused as children, and so many survivors, and it's horrible. And we all so deserve so much better. You know what I mean? And he talks about this. Alan Schwartz here from this www.mentalhelp.net says that number 4, a fear that underneath they are just like the abusive parent and that therefore they are inherently evil or are a bad seed, right? This is something that a survivor might think. Not everybody would think that, but some might, right? And, this is the thing. I didn't want to be my parents, you know what I mean? A fear that underneath they are just like the abusive parent and that therefore they are inherently evil or a bad seed, That's the last thing I wanted to be was my parents, you know what I mean? And so I realized, I thought, man, I wanted to be the opposite of my parents, which was to be a good person and to be, to not hurt people, right? And so I stuffed my anger in doing that. And what I did was I thought, well, I don't want to hurt people, so I want to be the opposite of my parents. So I stuffed all my anger, stuffed my rage, and then it just built up and built up and built up, and because I didn't want to hurt anybody, it was very destructive to myself. And it was, until I started working with it, it was a harsh issue because I would go through, some serious days of just raging inside, and not knowing how to let it out. I thought, well, if I let it out, it's going to destroy something. So it'll either destroy the room that I'm in, it'll destroy the people that are around me, it'll destroy somebody, or it'll destroy myself, and I had a lot of trouble working through that, but, it's taken me 4 years. I started my healing journey 4 years ago, and I've been working on it really pretty diligently. And it's taken me a long time to get where I'm at here today, and I'm still working on it, But that's the thing. I'm happy to be on this side of it. I know what it's like to be on the other side of this, right? I completely, I haven't forgotten, you know what I mean? And I still have momentarily, moments of it, right, where I can sort of still feel the same things. And yeah, we don't, I don't want to be just like my abusers, you know what I mean? And so I really had to work, hard to say, what am I doing? Are these behaviors really, something that I picked up from my parents, or is this something that I do? Because I certainly didn't want to be like them, and so it's just one of those things. And I thought, well, if I hurt myself and I kill myself, I'm just going to be doing what my parents would want me to do. That's what then they would win this fight, And I thought, no way, man, I'm winning this fight. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to have a good life. So in doing that, it's a slap in the face to them. Because by me becoming, a healthy individual who enjoys life and loves myself and nurtures myself, that's where I win this fight. Because they don't win, because they could not destroy me. So that's why it's really, really important for people to learn how to love yourself. Learn, we will. Really, who can do it for us? We have to do it, you know what I mean? It's literally up to us. And I had to learn how to love myself because I hated myself. And I hated my body. I hated everything about myself. And, I've come a long way because now I don't. I love myself. And I love this life that I've been given, and I didn't used to. And so, I've done a complete turnaround. And it's really a slap in the face to my abusers because it's like, ha, you could not get me. I'm going to have a great life. You all, whatever. And, yeah, that's just the whole issue. So I'm happy to be on this side of it. And I hope everybody else will stay here on this journey and never give up. That's all I can say. Just never give up, right? Well, I have about a minute left. Thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate you all tuning in early in the morning, and thanks a lot for listening to my shows. And if you need some information that I have, you can get a hold of me. Blog Talk Radio here on Facebook, whatnot. I'll be around. And otherwise, I'll be back around tonight for my show tonight, Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us, and also on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, so I'll be back later. So have a great day, everybody. Keep on reaching out. Don't give up. That's my big thing. Don't ever give up. You know, I wish I could have got a hold of my brothers in time and told them to, not to give up, right? So, but sadly enough, I couldn't do it. But don't you ever give up, right? That's all I have to say. So have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.